Hello everyone, I just thought of making a random video because I was working on a problem and I just found a solution that I think many people might find it very helpful. So I just configured this service on my system. So I'm currently running I'm currently running Fedora on kernel 6.10.11 with Cinnamon desktop under X11. So I think it won't be an issue because this software should be running fine on multiple architectures and multiple OS or distribution. So the software is called Blocky and it's a DNS proxy slash ad blocker for network level filtering. So uh, I'm sure a lot of people are kind of annoyed by lots of advertisements that they see on their websites, and they often just think having an extension from Play Store or Firefox is much easier. But I think we have even much better alternatives that can work across devices, across browsers, and even on devices that are much difficult to fiddle with, like iOS or iPad OS. Uh, so Blocky is something that does network level filtering, as soon as the requests are coming for a particular domain, uh, assuming that that's a domain that you have blacklisted, uh, it gets sinkholed to black hole. So you don't see that that website or that domain doesn't load on a system. So you can visit, you can just search blocky DNS, and I think this should be the first result. It's written by 0x error, and you can read all this documentation, the welcome page regarding all the features it has. But I'll give you a short overview how uh, this actually works. So I just drew a diagram beforehand here, and this gives a picture how a typical process happens when you try to visit a website. So for example, in your browser, if you try to visit, say, google.com, you just type google.com in your address bar, just like how we have excalidraw.com here. But Google is something, uh, it's like an address. When you typically send a post through your courier or any national postal service, you have to specify each and everything. Just not just mentioning, say, Malviya Nagar won't take you to the right Malviya Nagar. There might be multiple Malviya Nagar in this country. So to handle the situation, we have something called DNS name resolution, which just maps your English language domain name into something which actual web servers can understand. So on your device, whenever you try to visit some website, it goes through a process called DNS resolution through DNS resolver. What it does is it has a fixed set of way how it has to resolve a domain name. So it gets a www.google.com, it searches that domain name through authoritative DNS server. So authoritative DNS server is something which actually gives you the IP address of that address, and that IP address travels back to your device, and then you use that IP address to request the actual web page, and the web server returns you the web page back to you. So it's a pretty long cycle. If you can see, there are at least one, two, three, four, five, six hops, and I'm not even showing a lot of intermediate steps which are happening here. So even broadly speaking, we have six jumps that uh, your internet signal goes through before you can see a web page in front of a screen, and it happens within a split second. And the good thing about this blocky thing is that we can even make it much faster. Think of it in this way, that when you have six hops of network request to give you a back web page, what if your DNS resolver remembers the IP address? So it doesn't have to give you, it doesn't have to search through authoritative DNS server for every time you are looking for google.com. It can just remember that 5 minutes ago you searched for this web page, and Google has not changed the whole universe in the last 5 minutes, and hopefully the servers are still pointing to the same address for the same google.com domain. So it can just remember this information, and we call this caching. And typically on your operating system, you don't have much uh, possibility to fiddle with this DNS resolver. You can't change cache, you can't change a lot of things easily. This is something which your OS provider hard codes a lot of time, and they don't have much incentive for you to fiddle around, because if you miss DNS resolver here, probably your internet won't work, because this is an important linkage between how you browse your web. So this is DNS resolver, and this is exactly where we will be replacing our uh, blocky with. So currently, when I have the fresh install of Fedora Linux, I had systemd resolve, which is the native DNS resolver that comes pre-installed when I installed Fedora. Uh, I can change it. There are a lot of alternatives if you can search through ArchWiki. So if I search ArchWiki DNS, I think systemd resolve DNS mask, and likewise, I think if I just go to section 7, there are uh, multiple packages or uh, DNS resolver, DNS server that you can have uh, to show you the web page. But we'll be using Blocky here. So, what are the good things that we can have by having Blocky here? So, it can proxy your recent lookups, your future requests will be faster. Filtering. So, as you can see, this is an important step to actually get to the web page you want. So, if you want to mess with certain websites that you don't want to visit, or you don't want someone in your family to visit, or you want to create certain access controls, fiddling with the DNS resolver is the first place to go. Now, a side note here is that almost all the operating systems provide something called host file. So host file is something that you can check in your etc host on, I think, Mac and Windows. On Windows, I think it is in System32 Windows etc folder. But the file, if you search on Google, you will find something like this etc host file, and it's a old, very archaic way of handling this thing. You have to mention each and every domain as well as subdomain, like subdomain as in google.com, mail.google.com, images.google.com. Each of them you have to mention separately, and you can sync all those requests to 0.0.0.0, which in terms of internet means just a black hole. So all the response from for those domains will be just lost, and those sites won't be accessible. But this has certain limitation. You can't use wildcards. Wildcards as in you can't have certain patterns or regex that can block everything. Uh, the next step is logging. So if you can control your own DNS resolver, you can in fact create your own logs, which website you have visited at what time. You can maybe spy if you are very smart. Maybe if you hijack some DNS resolver of your organization or something, you can even spy on all the requests that are going through. But we are going for just personal usage here, and just you can distribute your request through multiple DNS servers. So instead of just using one authoritative DNS server, you can have multiple separate DNS servers, and this is something that Blocky actually does. And privacy. So typically your ADNS, if you don't configure anything by default when you connect to your Wi-Fi or your mobile network, ADNS server is usually something which your ISP provides, and hence your ISP knows every website that you visit. I hope that's not a shocker, but you can change this thing. You can have more trustworthy ADNS service providers that can help in improving privacy And if this party doesn't give you privacy, you can change this party so that you can increase your privacy. Uh, a popular example of this whole category of DNS proxy, DNS resolver include something called PiHole. So you can have a Raspberry Pi and install PiHole software on it, and all your requests will go through PiHole, come back through PiHole, and you can mention certain websites or ad servers that you want to block. There's a difference between both DNS resolver and authoritative DNS server. That DNS server is the final authority that eventually resolves your domain, but DNS proxy is something that just a postman between you and the post office, if I say in easy way. And also, if you screw this up, it's just over. And here it is a bit more uh, realistic diagram of how this request happen. Um if you want to read it, just pause it and see. But long story short, we'll be fiddling with this part. And here it is, Blocky. So to start with, you can just visit their GitHub page, 0xerror/blocky. Go to release tab, and it should show you all the changes. Grab the latest asset for your operating system. So Darwin is for Mac OS, FreeBSD, Linux, ARM64. We are concerned with the x86-64 for our architecture. There is a Windows thing, OpenBSD, NetBSD. So a lot of multiple architectures as well as operating system choice here. Since I think it's written in uh, Golang, so 99% written in Golang, so I think it's much easier for the developer to just shift for multiple architectures. So once you download the package and unzip in your system, this would look something like this. So just unzip it. You'll find logs and metrics as a folders which I made it for myself. You would mostly find just these four files. So it's a interesting thing that they just provide one single executable file and a single YAML file for configuration. And everything regarding the configuration step would be in this config.yaml file. Uh, so how to configure this config.yaml file? Also, interestingly, there is no file or database which you have to feed with all the domain names for blocking, because this thing runs on RAM while it is on fly. So there is zero requirement for having any disk-based storage for all the domain names or uh, that sort of thing. Uh, so I have my configuration open here, and we'll also check with the configuration that they provide on their website. So if you check this reference configuration file, it would be much easier. And they also have, the author has also commented out a lot of things that you can change. Uh, so we'll go through each step. So upstreams is which uh, authoritative DNS server that you want for resolution. You can provide multiple of them, and uh, it will have a default strategy of choosing. It picks two random resolvers from the list and find which is the fastest and just give it the result based on it. I have unit strategy of fail on error. So if none of these is setting up properly, then Blocky will just fail and crash. I want this because I don't want my network to start in a partial state and the script shows it's running, but it is not running in the background, and there's a dilemma of that sort. Then we just define our ports. So DNS is typically listened on port 53, and I just kept port 53. All this I think you can check in. So even in the next part of documentation, you can just copy paste all these steps and paste them here. So 53, 4000, 443 TLS ports. I've just mentioned those. Uh, Also, you can have all the three kind of situation here: DNS over HTTPS, DNS over TLS, or DNS over just typical domain name. And the good thing about DOH and DOD is that it is a bit more censorship proof, but not by a lot, but your traffic just looks like a normal traffic, like normal HTTPS traffic. So in that situation, a lot of ISP cannot block uh, websites that they naively do. For example, I think in India, a lot of random websites are blocked based on Government of India's direction, but you just bypassing through DNS resolver can allow you to visit those sites. Next is Bootstrap DNS. So Bootstrap DNS are so these are the domains that you can define, which you can use to search this thing. So when you first boot up your computer and start Blocky, and assuming you don't have any other network manager, you don't have an internet at this point. So without internet, you are expecting your computer to be able to understand dns.quad9.net. Uh, and to understand this, it needs a DNS resolver. So just to initiate our upstreams, these are the bootstrap DNS that we can have to parse and start our ADNS domains as well as our deny list log. So you can view your log when you launch the script on your console. Info is just the information plus warning plus errors, timestamp, privacy, all the good shit. Next is an important step. It's called blocking. So in the blocking step, you can uh, have deny list as well as allow list. So if you mention something in both deny list and allow list would be considered. And if you don't have anything in the deny list and just have the allow list, then all your internet traffic except the allow list would be blocked. So I don't have that sort of interesting setup here. And I have mentioned few of the domains. I'm also mentioning some of the domains on my own GitHub gist. So also this supports wildcard, and that is much helpful that if you want to visit this site, you can have just star.ebc.net.eu and it will block almost all the domains which end with this address. So I have added few of my own domains for all the news websites, all the social media websites. You can have Huggazy. Huggazy is a very famous uh, blocklist repository, and I'm very thankful for the author for hosting such a uh, broad range of internet protection kind of block list, and he in fact provides in almost all the formats, so host, file, add block format, and wildcard asterisk is something that we are looking. So you can just go to the mirror, grab the URL, and just paste it here. So under deny list, we can have something called groups. So you can define certain groups and organize your deny list in such a way. How this can be helpful is that even within your config.yaml, you can have something called client group block. And under client group, you can mention all the clients, or you can just mention their domain address, sorry, IP address, which will be connecting to your DNS server, and you can specify which groups are blocked for which clients. By default, default is something which is applicable on all the clients. I just mentioned all these three groups should be blocked for all the people. And next is loading. So it specifies how your loading strategy would be for all these domain lists. So I've kept the refresh period of 1 hour. So every 1 hour it tries to refresh those uh, block list. And the strategy here is failure and error. So if something goes wrong, your script crashes, you don't have internet. I think if you are in a situation where it's a critical environment where you don't want to have your internet go down, maybe don't have this. In fact, maybe don't have this kind of setup. Maybe stress test this multiple times. Concurrency, how many block lists you want to have parallelly downloaded. Timeout, I've kept it 5 minutes, so I think it's a decent timeout in case your internet is slow or your files. If any of your host list is very huge, then it might take 5 minutes. Just kept it 5 minutes. Have three attempts for reattempting if it cannot be loaded with a cooldown period of 1 second. Uh, Next is an interesting section called caching. So I've kept the minimum and maximum time of 5 minutes and 30 minutes. So uh, just like how I told earlier, the cache is something that is much helpful and can decrease your domain lookup times. And max item count is 0, so there is no limit of how many items your cache can store. Prefetching is true, and these two parameters are something which uh, can help your internet speed by a lot. So this configuration says if I visit a domain in a 24-hour window for at least two times, then it will cache those domains IP address, and I don't have to uh, continuously go through authoritative DNS server. It will just cache that information. So this is something you can configure. I think if I'm visiting a website more than twice, so better just remember that domain address. Next is Prometheus. I have no idea. I just followed someone else dom configuration step, and what I understand is that Blocky is currently not configured to have a nice UI or GUI. You can have a Grafana dashboard so that all the queries that you have blocked that are resolved, that were retried, you can get a nice dashboard, click all those slicers, monthly, weekly, daily, most blocked domain, least blocked domain. You can do all the data analysis with that. But nonetheless, you can also just have a CSV log of all the domains that you visited. I have kept it in this way, so every 30 seconds it will just log it for 7 days. So this is my config.yaml file. I think mm, this is interesting. I'm just using Cloudflare and Quad9 for domain name resolution. You can use any of the service. AvgRtt is of one which is very nice. Google also has its own DNS resolution server, but I just find these to be the most fast and most privacy respecting, malware protecting uh, EDNS servers. Even I think Cloudflare is not exactly very malware protecting, but given that we are loaded up with all these threat protection, TIF, so I think I might have missed it, but TIF is something that Hagazi provides, and threat intelligence feed. So they try to collect all the domains which are released by cybersecurity teams for malwares, cryptojacking, spam, scams, and they just update this file daily. Similarly, Wildcard Pro is their most recommended block list, and OISD.nl is also a particularly very good domain service, domain block list service provider. So this guy, they voluntarily spend their time and collect all these domains. Uh, Next we have adult websites. If you want to block those, you can have it this way. Block type, you can have NX domain or zero IP. So zero IP is something similar to how your host file works, 0.0.0.0, and you can use NX domain or this thing, and it's the same almost similar thing. I have heard NX domain is much better response type if you want to block a particular domain. Now, how can you check this thing? So this command called dig, you can use to dig google.com, and it will give you the resolved domain name, the domain name server. This so Blocky, when you start it, it starts a local DNS server on 127.0.0 0.1, and port number 53 is something on which it listens to. So this resolves perfectly, hence we are good. You can also use NS lookup. So NS lookup is something that works fine. We get the addresses that google.com points to. Something I know which I have blocked through my block list is Twitter. So if I do ns lookup twitter.com, server can't find twitter.com and its domain. So this is in black hole. I can do dig twitter.com, and this also shows nothing. So we have twitter.com here, but there is no response of which domain server it points to. So this is all and all good. Now next, the important stuff, how to start this thing properly. So once you've set up your config file, the next step is pretty simple. You just have to start blocky with this command from your terminal. So you can start blocky manually, but the problem is blocky listens on port 53 that I have shown here, and 53 is something which is already utilized by a previous DNS resolver. So in my case, I had systemd resolved on my system already installed, and it was already listening on port 53, and it will disallow you when you initially launch blocky. It will disallow you to use this port. So alternative is either you change this port number here and also open that port in your firewall and use that for DNS resolver, or else you can just disable your previously existing DNS resolver in this way, that how I did, and you can start using network manager to point to the right. You can use network manager itself instead of this systemd resolver. So I disabled I can't show it again now because I've already disabled, but you can disable it this way. Then you have to configure your network manager configuration file to have DNS equals to default under a main section. Restart your network manager, then remove the previously existing symlink. So resolve.conf is a file that actually tries to understand where to listen to for your local DNS resolver. You can remove the pre-existing file, create a new file by uh, transmitting the information that is stored in this file. Networkmanager.conf, you just symlink it with the resolve.conf, and now you can start blocky, and I think it should start properly, but the issue would be that you won't be able to use a browser to do anything. And the problem is your browser is listening to is trying to listen to some DNS server and doesn't know where to look for. You would in fact still be able to use dig at the rate 127.0.0.1 google.com to actually try to find your DNS query. So if you try to use from your command line, if you specify the name server, you would be able to resolve any domain name, but your browsers or your other software on your system won't be able to do it. So in order to do that, there are a lot of methods, but I found this to be particularly much more easier. That you create a new configuration file in this path and hard code that all your network interfaces, so your Ethernet and Wi-Fi, everything listens to 127.0.0.1 as name server, and you also mention global DNS enable equals to true. So what this does is this configuration tells the network manager to use our local host as a DNS server for all the network connections without needing to configure each of them individually. You can restart your network manager and now again try to check the etc resolve configuration file, and you will find that it says the name server 127.0.1. So if you're seeing this, all in all great. and I think that kind of does the job for us. Next, if you want to check if you are working on the right port or block is listening to the right port, you can just use sudo netstat tlpn and you can check. So block is listening to port 4000, 853, 53, 443. So all the ports that I mentioned in my configuration file, it's listening properly. And there is one more command to check uh, which DNS servers you are querying to. So nmcli dev show grep DNS. So it will show 1.1.1, 1.0.0.1. So these are the DNS authoritative DNS servers that I have configured on my Wi-Fi router, and hence they are being shown here. But uh, this is something which my router reports to my laptop, but my laptop is not obeying this. My laptop is instead obeying the name servers which I have provided in, which are being generated in my resolve.conf file. Uh, so next step is to just launch Blocky. Uh, so the way I told you earlier, /blocky config.yaml file, and you are good to go. So when you first launch it, it shows so here's an example that I ran it today afternoon, and it shows a whole lot of thing about it's trying to download the logs from this file. You have attempt 1 out of 3. So remember, we have provided 3 attempts for each uh, list download. So this is how it does it. Eventually, if you are successful, you will get all these 4 lines. Until you're getting all these 4 lines being shown, try to debug. Uh, also, you can in fact have lot more with Blocky, because Blocky also has interesting command line utility. So you can refresh your list using Blocky, refresh command Blocky serve, and Blocky query google.com is something that is same as NSLOOKUP or something like dig. You can have uh, you can have Blocky cache flush. So if I just see whatever available option, you can also flush your cache. So currently I've kept a cache of 30 minutes, which is pretty huge, I would say. So whenever I try to see one of those pages, the response time is much shorter because these queries are already cached on my system, and you can see cached also on. I think I think it's dig. You can see the query time of 0 milliseconds. So it's almost instantaneous. That, uh, for example, let's try to have Blocky. What was the command name? Hmm. Blocky. It's no. /blocky help. So what I want to do is I want to flush my cache. Uh, oh, Blocky. So if I flush the cache and I do dig.google.com, it takes 23 milliseconds. My next response is under 1 millisecond, 0 milliseconds. So after multiple attempts, so in a way you will actually feel your browsing speed to be much faster than before. And so this is how I configured. Now there is an issue which I'm facing. I don't know if how to solve this. Now there are 2 issues that I'm facing. One is this attempt thing, attempt 1 out of 3, 2 out of 3, 3 out of 3. A few times I have seen this goes 3 out of 3, then it fails. I don't know why all these uh, my block list are unreachable. I have tried a lot of things, but at this point, I think it is stable enough. Second issue that I'm facing is that I'm unable to create a system service. So I tried to create a systemd service so that Blocky is automatically started on system boot. I can have I can create a file in etc systemd blocky.service, have this uh, restart my systemd daemon and start the blocky service. But for some reason, I just keep encountering these errors: scheduled restart job, uh, status 203 slash exec 10 timeout.about.conf. For some reason, I'm not able to start blocky as a system service. But I think most of the popular Linux distribution have something called startup applications in their GUI or setting sections, and you can create a startup setting by just uh, you can just mention the command dot slash block instead of just putting a relative path. Just put the absolute path of blocky dash dash config, and you would be good to go. The reason I have disabled this now is because of this issue. This is failing out certain times, and if on boot, if it silently fails, I won't be even knowing why my internet is not working. So I just kept this thing to work in the background, and this actually helps a lot that I don't have to configure this or be surprised that I don't have internet suddenly. If you check the blocky in the interfaces section, it has a lot of interesting things. You can enable, you can disable the blocking, you can disable for certain duration. Yeah, and the reason I made those groups is if I want to disable a particular group from blocking my domains, I can do that. I can refresh blocky using this. Now this is a setup for my local system. In order to use it on to allow all your home devices to use this, you can have this installed and configure your router to use a fixed address. Uh, so on my system, if I check my settings, if I check my IP address, so currently I am on this address, 192.168.0.110. I can specify that address on my router's DHCP section, and then all my network traffic from my house would go to router. Router will ask my this particular laptop for DNS resolution. It will give a response back to router. The router will give response back to my Android phone, and that's how we do it. So different Wi-Fi router can have different settings, and I also have not fiddled with this personally, so I can't really help. Apart from this, you can have a lot of information uh, regarding Blocky on this page. So there are few GUI related things. So I was talking about this dashboard. You can have a dashboard like this: top 20 TLDs, top 20 query domains, blah blah blah. I'm not interested in this much data analysis as of now, and this serves my purpose. I just wanted to block all the ad domains, have a custom block list for whatever reason I think for that moment. So I can use it this way, and there's a web UI component. Blocky front end provides a web UI to control Blocky. List updater. There are a lot of accompanying projects, and I also know from a fact that Palvinder. So I think Palvinder is the guy whose video actually prompted me to use Blocky, and he has the video on his channel, Blockly
Hey
Certified.
everyone, welcome.
So I particularly referred to this video for understanding how Blocky works. And also there is a comparison video between PiHole, AvgRtt Home and Blocky. And eventual conclusion is uh, Blocky, although takes a bit more system resources in terms of memory, but it is really simple. A single file, a single configuration file, zero dependency, and the resolution times are much faster compared to the competition. Now, I also went one step further and tried to find the efficacy of my block list, and there is this tool called uh, DNS check microfile. So this guy created. Wait a second. Why is GitHub not opening for me? Huh, interesting. Maybe something related to DNS resolution, I guess. uh, or maybe my Wi-Fi network. So, anyways, until that loads, so DNS check is a service that allows you to uh, benchmark different name servers against of a text file containing a list of domains. And so I wanted to check how much protection all these different name servers provide. And you can visit these, I can list them in the description. So zone file, uh, whole cert, URL host. So all these guys, they keep their cybersecurity firms or something which provide uh, malware or threat protection to multiple IT services or businesses, and they compile and keep update keep updating these harmful malware, cryptojack, crypto spam, all these uh, bad domains in one list. So I com compiled all these three latest lists, uh, which are like exactly. So they are updated almost daily. So I tried this yesterday for 30th October, 30th September. So all these three list comes out to 75,000 domains, and I tested Blocky initially without threat intelligence protection list from Hagezi, and once without it. I have also compared with Quad9 Secured, Google, Cloudflare Family, Cloudflare, AvgRtt Home, AvgRtt Family, AvgRtt DNS, and AvgRtt Family DNS. So you can check the efficacy of how many uh, malicious domains were blocked by different name servers, and also the average round trip time in milliseconds for all these services. And Blocky turns out to be fastest. So I got an average round trip time of under 70 milliseconds for both Blocky with threat intelligence feed and without threat intelligence feed. And we got 94% efficacy, 98% efficacy. The best for Quad9. So Quad9, without any doubt, they're the best players in this game for malware protection and giving a authoritative DNS resolver that you can trust without any thinking. So you can just put those in your devices, just eyes closed, and you can easily get 99% protection against all these harmful domains. Google allowed at least like 27% of domains to pass through. Cloudflare family as well as Cloudflare, they're not much helpful. So Google and Cloudflare turned out to be among the lowest when it comes to efficacy blocked, but at least the round trip times were reasonable compared to AdGuard. So for some reason, at least in my geography, maybe it can differ in your geography, at least in India where I live, uh, round trip times for AdGuard is super huge. It's almost 300 milliseconds, which is a bit nuts. And also the issue is AdGuard family is a hosted managed service, so you have to trust AdGuard. And I think they are pretty reasonable company. but you won't have that much flexibility when it comes to which block list to use, which custom block list to use, and that sort of flexibility in your DNS proxy. So I think all in all, pretty good uh, reason to use Blocky. You have 98% efficacy, sub best in class, almost best in class average round trip time, and yeah, it blocked almost 74,000 domains, which is pretty nice. And these are the list of uh, block list that I was using with my Blocky setup. And I also tested it with top 10,000 or 50,000 domains, but I did not created a nice result summary out of those. But yeah, you can also check how many false positives each of your setup is giving, so you don't accidentally blacklist something that you really want, because it's an issue. Either you change your DNS to back, or have a separate config file without any blocking, or turn off blocking for a short interval time to overcome this. But more or less, I think this is pretty good. You have Blocky. I think that is it. I think if anyone finds a way to get the systemd service running, then it's very helpful. I was not able to get it running, so I won't speak about it a lot, but I at least wrote my observation in Blocky's discussion section as well as issue section. Uh, I hope someone helps me out in this thing. But apart from this, I think it's a solid service. Initially, I was thinking of having PiHole set up, but PiHole documentation and everything scared me off that it requires so much fiddling. Uh, but this is much more straightforward. So yeah, Blocky. Bye bye.